Greetings, Darklings, from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. We got a really, really special one today. I know I always say that because I get excited, but this one will have a story going along to it. Before we get into that, I was going to shout out here, coming up, I'm going to be going to cover a show in Detroit for VASM, and more importantly, coming all the way from Italy, Ash Code, which will be the first time that I've got to see them live. I am really, really geeked for it. That should be really cool. So when I started this music review page and going through it, I stumbled into some amazing brand new post-punk, goth, darkwave music that was kind of coming on by storm and got me back into being excited about new music. And the very first thing that I reviewed when I came up with this idea drunk at 2 a.m. that I just needed to talk about this and someone would care to listen or read it was this band I found from Texas called Twin Tribes. And I heard it, and it was like the first time that I heard The Cure Disintegration or, something like that just hit me. And immediately I knew that this was something special, something extra. And I just had to run into the streets and talk about it. And I've interviewed Twin Tribes a few times since then, but just like our Sounds and Shadows family here that has blown up in a crazy way I never could have predicted in 5 years, so has that original band that I did that first interview for, with their first album, Shadows, which became a part of what I would later call Sounds and Shadows. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome back to the show here, Joel and Luis of Twin Tribes. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you. So good to talk to you again, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ken. Quite the introduction.
Well, I mean, like I said, this one's a lot of fun for me because you guys are a big part of my story in doing Sounds and Shadows too, and so no, it's always fun when it kind of comes together like that, and you feel like a part of each other's journey. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot of ground to cover. For one thing, coming up here, I'm going to get to see you guys live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a short amount of time here. And I got Rachel and me a cool hotel at a bed and breakfast there. We're going to make a night of it, do the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. So before we get to that in the future, though, let's talk a little bit about what all has changed, since you guys kind of started on this journey, 5 or 6 years ago too, and now getting to do things like be in LA at Cruel World Fest, and I mean, just playing for that many people. What did this start out for you guys, and what does it make you think to what it's become today?
It's surreal. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it seems like Joel and I are always looking back and, dude, look at where we are at now. And isn't that crazy? And we're always just thinking about how 5-6 years ago we're just putting out a tape, and it just started snowballing from there. It's been very, very crazy experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 5 years has kind of flown by. I just it doesn't even feel like that long. We're not the new kids on the block anymore. But it's just been amazing how everybody has taken to the music, and we're just grateful for all of it.
I think another thing that I think of when it comes to you guys is that a lot like actors, who I think is, a good parallel for you guys. You guys kind of started coming to attention at the same time and have played together and, done things together. Always on the road. I feel like, you guys came from doing day jobs and, having to work in time to go out on the road and travel and get in front of your fans, to now having the opportunity where this has kind of become more your focus. And what are some of, was that different for you? Were you kind of world travelers before you started doing this? Because now you've been all over the place, got to meet how many different people in different countries. How has that changed you, do you think? Do you think you've become a more worldly group of individuals, understanding kind of other cultures and places that you've been?
I mean, it's crazy to, think back in all the, countries and cities that we visited, that we've been lucky to play at. Before that, I had never really traveled outside of the country, other than Mexico. Had never really visited a lot of places in the US either. So the band is really what brought me to, meeting people in other cities, opened, other cultures for us. But yeah, aside from that, I had never, experienced any of this at all.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I had maybe been out of Texas once or twice.
I don't know, Joel, that mustache looks like a man who has traveled. Come on.
True. I'm a worldly person now. The mustache didn't come at first. I was clean shaven, but I guess with my travels, the mustache came. But yeah, I think being able to see not only other states and other areas in the US, but other countries, and being able to experience those cultures and the food and the people. And what kind of stays the same is the love for the music wherever we've traveled. And that's the beautiful thing. We're in, Lithuania or where else were we? Estonia, just these crazy places, and but they're still like singing the songs there as they are, into it. Maybe they don't even know, the entirety of the English that we're
Sure.
singing, but it's just a beautiful thing, and it's just been really cool.
What's a place that surprised you guys? I mean, having been so many places, where you got there and you didn't expect that this was going to be a place you could fall in love with, and like you said, that the fans there were so intense and receptive to you the way that you would get when you were in the States or in Mexico.
I think maybe Vilnius when we were on our European tour. Yeah, I just never thought that there could be a mosh pit to every single song of your set. So that was very, very, it was totally different vibe that we're from what you're used to. But as soon as Fantasma started playing at the end, which is like the song that probably everybody associates us whenever they think about Twin Tribes, it just went off. It went off, and the energy was insane. And like Joel said, it's just like this breaks all barriers of like, communication and languages, because the energy was insane. And I don't know, I don't think there's anything like that in the States.
No, I hear you like that. I think that's definitely true for a lot of places. And I think it's also exciting for, say, someone in another country when you travel all the way there. We just played with Golden Apes last weekend, and the same kind of thing. When someone is traveling that far to visit you, I think there's a special kind of energy associated with that too, where you get excited to see something just so unique and fresh from what's coming through, your daily local music scene. So would you say, I'd like to now talk a little bit about the past and, what kind of brought you to here. Shadows, as I kind of talked about, was what put you on my radar and made me fall in love. What's something from that album that you still feel is a core to the music that you're doing today, that's still a big part of you? And then what's one thing from when you released Shadows that you think is very different now in terms of how you think about making your music?
I think that there's still a lot of similarities. Even you'll see that even in Ceremony. Yes, the band has been growing. There's been some sonic changes there, but for the most part, the formula is still the same. you'll still listen to a song if you listen to one of the new songs, and I think that you can associate it with Twin Tribes. It's still very simple, it's minimal. We try to have the chorus is a little catchy, a little bit more upbeat. So there are a lot of similarities from our new music to Shadows, but even in Ceremony as well. But you can also hear, that there are different sounds, different rhythm patterns, different chord progressions, where I feel is the first time that the band is kind of like dwelling in this little realm of different notes. But you can definitely hear Twin Tribes. At least that's what I think.
I would agree. I would agree very much. And we're going to get to talking about that on some of the things that I think have changed. But I'm just interested in, for you guys, what about you, Joelle? Do you think that there's anything both at the core when you think about the new record that just stands out in your mind, like this is the essence of us that's still here? And then one thing that you think about, whether it's a new piece of equipment, whether it's, a different way that you think about recording now or anything like that, that you feel like you've grown in since you started this journey?
I think at the core of it's always been, just me and Luis, kind of the simplicity of it, just really concentrating on how we can deliver our music in a way that's kind of like easy to take, but also, continues on with where we started with Shadows, but also builds upon it is what I should say. But that's really it, is simplicity. There's no need to get like overly complicated, for us anyways. And it's always been about writing something. What would we want to listen to? What would we want to hear in a club? What would we, want to just pop into a record player, a CD player on Spotify? Do we like it? And if we do, awesome, then that's what we want to kind of put out there. And so I think that's how it's kind of stayed the same. And new, as far as what's coming up, like we've explored new synths, different types of structures in our music, and so working with different producers, it's been just something that's slowly evolved, but still at the core, it's always been the same.
You talk about new synths there. Do you guys have any new toys that you've brought out for this and for this tour, maybe, that you're kind of excited to put in front of people and have them hear for the first time?
Yeah, we have a little bit of both. We do have a new live rig that we've been slowly building and slowly kind of like tweaking here and there. And aside from new synths, we do have new synths. I think one of the newest ones was just a Roland Juno 106. And aside from that, we're still using the Roland JX3P. We also use the Korg DW8000, and all of these are going to be in the new album. But for the live setup, it's just trying to figure out and basically trying to figure out how can we take all of these sounds live without having to take the Roland Juno 106 on tour or the JX that we need to retire, because these analog sounds are like a big part of the band, but it comes to a point where after 5 years we have to retire the JX live. And sadly, as much as it hurts, we have to figure out a different way to be able to have these sounds live. And that's what we're working on now. So just sampling a bunch of these sounds into an MPC, and trying to figure out best ways to travel as well with these sounds, and just trying to figure out a way. And that's kind of like what we're working on right now.
Because like we said, I mean, it isn't like maybe when you guys started out that you had to figure out, okay, it might be a pain, but we really want to have these synths and these sounds here, so we're going to make room in the van to load up these giant lug heavy pieces of keyboard and then drive to the next town in a van. Now we're not talking about that. You guys are getting on a plane, you guys are going to Europe, you guys are going to, and so it does. I mean, you have to think about that from a different standpoint. The other thing I wonder too is that you guys also, from seeing your live show from the first time I did, a big thing that touched me is the ritual of it. The two of you, it really, no matter how big the show has gotten, it feels intimate. That you guys are there with smoke and incense and candles and conjuring something, for the audience in this. And part of that I always felt like was, even when you have a bass in your hand or a guitar in your hand, you also had the keyboards there and you were kind of playing different elements of the spell when you did that. Now that you guys have to evolve in that, what are some of the ways that you're trying to keep that intimate ritual feel while having to maybe change up some of the instrumentation?
Yeah, totally. I think that, when we were practicing, or like 5 years ago, Joel and I wanted to keep it like you said. It's basically like a ritual. It's a whole show. It's not just, a couple of dudes gonna just press play on the backing tracks and here we go. So everything, had to be rehearsed. Everything took time. And since now we're not using drum machines live, we're not using like the JX3P and all these things. What I feel is going to help us, even though we're using different equipment, is that the sounds remain the same. So we worked on sampling the JX3P, sampling the Juno 106, and these sounds are still going to be live, even though we're not using the heavy synths to carry it throughout all tour. The sounds are going to be the same. And as you mentioned, production, we've been trying to work on more production live. So incorporate lighting, add to the fog, add visuals, and try to make it as intimate as possible, like you said.
Yeah, intimate, but also providing like the best show possible,
Yeah.
We're always like kind of trying to not upgrade but add on to what we've always had live. I think we bring an energy that it's hard to kind of, I guess, replicate, over and over and over. So we, add stuff on, if with the new songs, like you're probably going to see me a little bit more behind the keys now. So it's always going to be like a little bit of a different thing when you come out to see us, and we take pride in that because nobody wants to get boring, nobody wants to get complacent.
Sure.
And so adding on to what we've done in the past and what's been successful is always part of our strategy when we're doing things live.
You mentioned a second ago, Luis, about adding in lights. And I mean, you guys had, kind of that smoky feel and, but before doing this, did you guys go through and work on some kind of programming for lights to take on the road yourself, or did you bring in someone to do that?
So basically both. Now, as the years went by and the band started growing, we were able to take our own sound engineer. So Vincent from Wingtips travels with us. He does sound, and before going on tour, he actually programmed all of the lighting for. So we gave him like a set list, and he's amazing at that because it is definitely another beast, a whole new realm for us that I honestly don't have a clue. I have very little knowledge about DMX, but Vincent is amazing, and he did all of this for us. And when we travel together, we trigger the lights on our own, and Vincent just runs sound, and it's been working great.
That's amazing. And it's so cool too that to have somebody as talented as Vincent, helping you out and doing this behind the scenes stuff, but also somebody who you've played with a ton, that's in an incredible band of their own, who gets it, like understands what the importance of that connection with the audience through the lights and other aspects, but B, has seen you guys play so much because they've played alongside you at so many things where you know each other's songs, where you can, you know, sing them without even thinking about it and whatnot, what that goes into the thought process of then trying to make a visual interpretation of it.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, he it knows exactly what our vibe is. We've played together so many times, and if you've ever been to a Wingtip show, you know that the lighting is always on point. The stage presence is always on point. Him and
The
Hannah
special
absolutely.
fan to make Hannah's hair blow back perfect is
Yeah,
always on point.
and it keeps you cool. It's not just for show.
Exactly.
So we've experienced that. Fan is just a miracle. But yeah, we're just super lucky that he's you know, been so kind and given us that kind of time and worked with us. And yeah, he's such a talent.
So we've talked a lot about the music leading up to this and what's happened, but you guys do have some exciting news to announce. And at this point, I'd like you to kind of talk about what you are about to drop and what that's going to mean for the future of Twin Tribes.
Well, I mean, it's been now 4, 5 years since the last album of original music. And so, you know, I think as this releases, you know, it's just been announced and out there now, our first single. But we're super excited about it. The album's called Pendulum. We've been working on it over this past year, just putting all of our time, all of our efforts into it. We're super excited for everybody to hear it. But that's what's next is kind of getting that music out there and just touring behind it.
Luis, did you have anything you were going to throw in there about why you're excited for the release of Pendulum?
I think that I'm excited because I know how much the fans have been asking for new music. So really, really excited to drop this already. Just want the fans to be able to listen to the album, you know, to catch a show on the next tour. We're gonna do a lot of live shows next year. Really hit the road behind this next album, and I think it really shows, you know, an evolution of the band musically. So I think it's going to be very interesting to hear everybody's point of view after they listen to the album and just kind of compare to our previous releases.
What's that like for you? I think this is one too, as you guys are one of the modern success stories in this genre, you know, where so many bands now are trying and thinking about how do we get out there and get notice and get attention and get our music out to people. You guys have gone to the point where you had to constantly promotionally bust your hump to get anyone to listen, to pay attention. Once they did, they went, oh my God, this is amazing. And they were in, but just getting it in front of people to the point where now 5 years later, you have people begging you, when are you going to give us more, Luis? When are you going to give us more, Joel? We need more new music. What is that like in terms of just a transition in mindset for you?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you mentioned before, Joel and I were just trying to do everything, joining Facebook groups, adding a bunch of, you know, contacts, networking, you know, trying to do our best to get our music out there. And like you said, now it's just surreal to see how much the band has grown and how everybody is just eager to listen to new music. So you know, like Joel said also earlier, this is something that we do because we you know, believe in this music. We love this genre, and all of this next album is just something that we really love. And you know, we understand that not everybody is going to like what you release or something. Sometimes people are going to say it's not like Phantasmas or it's not like this, and that's totally normal. But you know, that's something that you as a musician just set that aside, and you're just like, this is what I decided to put out because this is what I love. And hopefully the people are going to, you know, listen to the album and connect with it, and just it's just going to be interesting.
you have to listen to your own heart. And that's why too, I think with each of your individual album titles, I think that tells a lot about your journey too. I really like this idea of kind of this third what pendulum, swinging back the other way or trying to find a balance. Tell me a little bit about how that title came to you and how it kind of encapsulates this record.
Yeah, honestly, everything was just a by chance and coincidence. This album was nothing but fate for us because we were originally supposed to go on tour and it with another band, and it didn't happen. So we decided to just set that time aside to record and just set ourselves some deadlines. And once the writing process started, and once these demos were pretty advanced and we were ready to hit the studio and record, everything just happened by chance. The whole vibe and the aesthetic and the whole concept behind the album is just the balance that we wanted to achieve. And that balance is that you can't just have everything dark. There's also some light. And the whole idea of the pendulum came from just bouncing back and forth names, titles, ideas, track names, until I think that we were pretty close to hitting the studio. Or I'm not sure if we were already in the studio, but that's when we decided that Pendulum was a really great title. And just reading a bunch of like occult library that it just kind of made sense. The whole idea of the pendulum being having balance in the album, and that's where the white and the black comes from. And just once we started writing, everything just fell into place, basically.
Yeah,
Joel,
I
you're gonna add?
yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll add on to that is that as as Louise mentioned, that it did kind of piece itself together. Like it was so weird to be a part of it. It was almost like almost like there was a spiritual connection behind it, to where it's just like coming together and things falling into place perfectly. It was just so weird, but beautiful at the same time. And but anyways, back to like the title Pendulum. Like we came to that, but the music and the album as it's kind of put together is a perfect representation of it. I've been listening to the album on record, and I found it super strange that, as I played the side A into the side B, I was like, well, I could also start it on side B and then just go to side A, kind of like a constant loop. And it's kind of like it just works, whichever way you play that. And so I thought that was really cool. And but yeah, that's really that's something I just noticed. It's crazy.
It's funny. So I wonder if you guys ever had, I'm gonna add, my favorite book is by an author named Umberto Eco, and it's called Foucault's Pendulum. About kind of the person who did the pendulum. Did either of you guys ever read that one?
I haven't.
No,
I'm
haven't
gonna send you over a link. I think because it also involves, like, I would say probably the best way to describe it is it's like Dan Brown for people beyond a fifth grade reading level. It's like a really but it's all about kind of just that, like, Gnostic magic and secret societies and, Knights Templar and stuff, like hidden in plain view and things like that. So no, it just got me. I was wondering if that ended up being an inspiration because the titles matched up, but I'm going to send it to you. I bet you guys will get a big kick out of it.
I already love it. Can't wait.
Great.
Okay. So the next thing I want to touch on is that, like you mentioned, whether it's Phantasm, you guys have always put on each one of your records kind of a touch to the idea that your Latin heritage and Spanish as a language, putting it into your music to kind of have that aspect and that piece of you, which is something that doesn't always get as much attention as it needs, like the Mexican goth scene and whatnot on a world stage. And I feel like you guys who have this following and have this voice now doing that is extremely important to get people to understand, maybe even if you don't understand every single word of it, that you can still have that emotion carried across. And when a band has that much quality, they can pull that off, even in a language that maybe isn't familiar to you. So on the new album, I'm firing through and listening to everything. And one of the tracks that hit me hardest in the same way was Sangre de Oro. And tell me a little bit about that song and why it was important for you guys to have that on the record and the flavor that you feel like it adds.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, we always try to have a little bit about our heritage in the albums, and in Ceremony we had some track names or a little bit of pieces of Spanish, but we knew that we wanted to have our track, a full Spanish track. So for this album, we tried it for the first time, and it turned out to be Sangre de Oro, which the translation, it translates to I guess gold blood or golden blood. And the whole idea behind the lyrics is just dating back to the Aztecs. Since we were talking about wanting to talk, have a Spanish song, we kind of just got inspired by very bizarre sacrifices that would happen in those times. So that's kind of like the idea behind the title of the track. And it like Joel said, it just fell into place. The song's like very energetic. So we just kind of started dabbling between ideas here, throwing this and that. And that's kind of how Sangre de Oro was born.
Yeah, and just the representation of our heritage and just Spanish and being the Latinos as well, Mexican American in my case, and Luis as well Mexican. It's very important to us to represent, and it's not lost on us that that kind of thing matters. We have fans coming up to us that say, it's so cool to see somebody like me, up there on the stage and having success and inspiring me to do the same thing, right? We've had a lot of bands tell us that as well. And so it's really cool and it's very important to us. And having a complete song in Spanish is just, that next step and just fulfilling that goal that we have.
And like you said, just to add on a little bit to it, like you said, we've listened to post-punk or goth music in German, or like She Passed Away, and like you don't really need to understand to feel like what the artist is trying to express. And then later, I remember going back and translating She Passed Away lyrics, and I'm just like blown away, which is a huge plus. But it's just something that just breaks all barriers.
No, I agree. And no, it was why I was so excited to hear that. And I think too that, you get that same impact and that same emotion, but there is something to be said for a place like Mexico City that has such a huge love for darkwave and goth music. But a lot of the biggest bands and things followed in there are still going to be The Cure and New Order, and where they're translating the lyrics in their head, and to have songs that they're hearing first in their own mind, in their own time, it's a big deal. And there are a lot of amazing bands from Mexico City and Peru and El Clan and big name bands that came through in the goth scene. But I love the idea of seeing fresh new ones in kind of this next generation coming up, where there's going to be goth fans in Mexico City 15 years from now, that you guys, are some of their first big, dipping a toe into the water of that scene and having it actually be in their own tongue. And there's just something so exciting about that and hopeful for the future, that this scene keeps expanding and getting bigger around the globe.
Definitely.
Yeah. And speaking on that Mexico scene, we're really excited about actually playing our first tour there in December. And yeah, speaking to the talent that is there in the scene, I mean, we have Leonora Post Punk that's going to be joining us. There's bands like Vacíos Cuerpos, Hoffen. I mean, the list goes on. Prismatic Shapes, yeah, that we've also worked with in the past. But the list goes on, and so it's just really cool to, as you mentioned, like you sing a song and it's in our tongue. Like that's just something that's the feeling is different, right? And so yeah, it's just a really cool thing to do, and there's a lot of respect for those scenes in Mexico because they've been so strong, since the 80s, right?
Yeah.
It's been there, and it's a beautiful thing.
Tell me a little bit. You mentioned there briefly that Mexico is one of the stops on all these shows. When you have this album coming out and you're going out to support it all over, where are some of the countries and places that people are going to be able to see you on this tour so that they can take in the new show?
Yeah, definitely. Mexico. We're going to be in Mexico at the end of or early December or mid-December.
Mhm.
But our album is not going to be out until next year. So we do have, I think, we plan to be in Mexico once the album's out. But the first tour, if I'm not mistaken, might be Europe. Joel?
Yeah, I think that's how it's planned out right now. We're gonna hit up Europe first, in 2024. So Germany, the UK, Spain for the first time, Italy for the first time. Um, so yeah, those dates probably will be announced by the time the album is out. So we'll have those going first. Of course, we're going to be touring the U.S. completely,
Sure.
and hitting Mexico again, and Canada hopefully for the first time. So,
Oh,
as we mentioned earlier, like touring has been always been a staple of what we do. Like that's the first and foremost thing, like for promoting yourself, is getting out there in front of people and playing your music. And so we do it heavily, and this is going to be a really extensive tour, and that's by our standards. So it's going to be we're going to be out there quite a bit.
so I think that's another thing too of you guys spending so much time doing this. And you talk about the ritual of doing your show, but also part of that is the sacrifice of it. And I think that's something that everybody doesn't understand or doesn't see because you want to think about the glamorous rock star life, like going town to town and meeting fans and having them scream your name and stuff like that. But also, I mean, especially with like you guys have very close ties to your family and you are giving up swaths of time and life to go out and do this and yes, sure, I mean, live this dream of doing it, but also how much does it matter that support from your family to back you up and help you on this? Because how do you do that? I know for me, if I had to be that far away from Rachel and my cats for that long, I don't think I'd last more than 6 days. It is a serious sacrifice and thing to think about. How does that play into what you're doing?
It's tough. It's tough. Back when we started playing for the first time, when we both have day jobs, we
Yeah.
would only tour twice a year, I believe. And that was when I had summer off, and then it was like the winter break. So we sacrificed probably like 4 or 5 Christmases.
Yeah.
And that's time that we could have been with our families. And we've sacrificed Thanksgiving sometimes, and it's definitely hard being not at home. I'm a dad now, and it's definitely difficult being away from home. But we understand that it's part of being a musician now that we're full time doing this full time. But it is tough.
Yeah, and we wouldn't be able to do it without such a strong foundation and support system at home. Let's just be honest. Our families do mean everything to us, and so it is tough to be away from them. And But as Luis mentioned, it is part of being a musician. It is part of us, right? Just being a loving music. I mean, you know, and loving the music that we play and wanting to show it to the world. You know, that's just one of those sacrifices that has to be made, unfortunately. But thankfully, we have, as I mentioned, a strong support system that really knows what we love, knows that it's part of us, and that you know, if we weren't doing it, you know, it would be a not a miserable life, but a much less inspiring one.
Sure, a rich or full one for certain. And I was going to ask that next. I was talking to Slade Templeton about this crying vessel, and who also just had a kid, and like how this changes your writing perspective for music, because your worldview just can't be the same afterwards. Do you think that that has factored into maybe where this album is at, as opposed to Shadows, in terms of just the type of things you think about when you're getting ready to write are changed?
Definitely. I think that, you know, being a dad now and you know, is just a different place mentally, does influence the album, but so do you know, other things that happen in life. You know, so does loss and you know, so you know, being a dad, it does influence. But for this album, you know, I think that we try to keep it in like a concept, and you know, we do talk about other themes, but I know, I've heard Lebanon Hanover songs that you just read the title and you hear the songs and you know that William or Larissa are talking about their kids. So I think that that's something amazing. I don't think that we have done something like that yet, but I'm sure that it'll happen. You know, we at some point we had a couple of shows with them, and we saw that they're touring, you know, with their partners, with their kids, and it's like a total different vibe, and it's just very inspiring. It's very inspiring to see that, because they tour way more than us, and it just makes sense, you know, to keep the family close. So I just thought that that was something like, it was really cool.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. And just, I don't know, like you said, I love that change. And I think things are changing. Like the world of Motley Crue and just God knows what backstage and this, you know, I think that's at least to a point done. You know, I don't think fans or people want that in their band or their mystique anymore. They want someone real, someone relatable, someone who is expressing feelings that they feel too, whether it's about their families or, like you said, loss or a lot of those things. That's the connection made now, not, you know, doing an IV of 3 bottles of Jack Daniels or something backstage. And, you know, like I don't think there's that much intrigue in it anymore as maybe there used to be in that type of a lifestyle in your 20-year-old rock stars, you know. And I think that's for the better. I approve.
Definitely, definitely, I agree.
So going along with that question, though, you guys have played some of these big festivals now where you're playing with, you know, Sisters of Mercy or, like, you know, these huge name bands, you know, on the festivals. They always say, you know, either whether it's, you know, don't meet your heroes or what have you, but now that you guys have had a chance to be in contact with some of these huge name, you know, bands that you grew up loving in the same way, tell me a good story about one of somebody that you met that was a big deal to you through playing with and you had a lot of musical respect for, and you got a chance to actually have a one-on-one encounter with somebody like that.
For sure. I think we both have a couple of stories, but um, I think for me, it was, you know, I talked about it a little bit a little while ago, but being on tour, we had in Europe in 2021, we had, I think, 2 shows with Lebanon Hanover, and always been a huge influence, big deal to us. But both of us are pretty shy. So, you know, it's just kind of like hard to approach someone that you look up to so much. So I think that we played the first show with them, and we had just kind of like said hi. We met very briefly backstage. We were having lunch. They were doing their thing, but we spent the night at a hotel. All the bands were in the same hotel. Next morning, I wake up. I think Joel and our friend Eric that was running merch were still in the room. I head back down to get breakfast, and William from Lebanon, Hanover is like signaling, like, "Hey, come here, sit down, come on." And I'm just like, "Me?" So I just go, I follow them, and he's like, "Come on, sit down, sit down." He's with Sven, their merch person, and he sits me down, and he's like, "Coffee," and I just grab a mug, and he's pouring me coffee, and I'm just like, "Is this really freaking happening right now? Fuck!" And that to me was just crazy. It was just wow, such a nice guy, such a nice band in general, and that's probably like my highlight of the tour.
Yeah, and I think speaking to that, the same thing happened to us with she passed away here in the US, you know. Um they were so kind to us, and like Luis mentioned, we're super shy. And not only that is that we don't like to, I guess, be a bother. You know what I mean? Like we want to give them the respect of their privacy, and if they want to talk, I'm sure they come up to us. And but anyways, that was really cool too. We got to speaking to them, and now we're really good friends, and that's just part of the cool thing about playing with some of your heroes. I mean, kind of going with this past year playing darker waves, no, cruel world, we were backstage, and like there's Gary Newman's trailer like right across, and I'm walking out, and then I see like Billy Idol in his trailer with his family, and it's just like things like that. It's like, wow, what is this life, and just how lucky are we to be able to do this, and seeing Iggy Pop being part of it, like it's just so cool.
It's crazy. Like, and the only person, because I was too shy to say hi to Gary Newman, but I think the only person that I actually talked to was one of the guys from Modern English. They played right after us, and they were just like, "Great set." And I was just like, "Wow,
Wow.
crazy."
No, I hear you. And all of that is very relatable. I find myself in constant surprise and shock, the people who bother to talk to me now. And Iggy Pop, I never talked to him, but I was in the Roar Tour festival when I was like 16, and there was a big mosh pit, and Iggy Pop came right over the top of 16-year-old Ken, and I just like reached up like this and just booped him right on the nipple by accident. So I mean, and I didn't wash that finger for like 5 or 6 days or something. I put like a plastic bag on it. So I can relate in that sense too, because I did touch Iggy Pop's nipple.
That's amazing.
That's great. That's great. Once the finger starts turning green, this it's time
Yeah, I
for.
mean, eventually, again, I was 16. My mom put a kibosh on it eventually, but I mean, I held out for like a hot minute where like I would wash the rest of my hand and just have like a little plastic glove, over that finger. So,
Amazing.
all right. So we are coming up here at the end of the interview here. And as a music review page, first and foremost, one of the questions that I always like to ask, and especially for you guys that I feel have truly bridged the gap between kind of the newer wave and kind of led the charge of the newest wave of goth and, knowledge of what happened before. Each of you, please tell me a band that you are listening to or inspired by right now that gets you excited, whether it's somebody that you're going to be playing with one of the tours coming up on, or just something you're spinning on Spotify right now. Why don't we start with Joel, and then we'll go Luis.
Okay, yeah. It just came out, but I've really taken a liking to Drab Majesty's new album.
Always.
Yeah, yeah. Just the way that they kind of had the cojones or the balls, you could call it,
Sure.
to just
You can see
really.
balls on this show.
Yeah,
Damn
perfect.
thing.
Okay.
It's fine. I don't try and monetize.
Yeah, just to have the balls to kind of like veer off into such a like just way out in left field kind of direction for the music is just really inspiring. that's just really cool. And not only that, but the music that they put out is also so good. It was I would think that being a fan, you could be on either you really like it or you just really do not, right? There's the for I think that's what I've seen anyways as far as response goes. But for me, that's just been a really cool thing to kind of listen back to, and yeah, just for me in general as we move forward and maybe create music in the future. Uh, hopefully have that kind of bravery to be able to push our boundaries and kind of get out of our comfort zone is something that I would love to explore in the future.
Sure. And I would say that there is a connection between what you guys do in Drab Majesty for sure, in the sense that, kind of like we talked about a lot, there's a band who really connects their sonic to their visual. There is no line between those two, and I think that's something that, yeah, you guys definitely are inspired by and use a part of, wanting to have an entire experience of what you're seeing matching what you're hearing. All right,
Absolutely.
Luis, what about you? What's something that you've been listening to that's been firing you up lately?
Yeah, I guess I'll go with the band that I was listening to when I was getting ready today. They're great though. They're called Corbo Hangs. I'm not sure. I believe that's how it's pronounced, but I could be wrong. But they're spelled Corbeau, Corbo Hangs. Uh,
Okay.
they're based out of Phoenix, I believe. If not, in definitely from Arizona, but I believe they're based out of Phoenix. And they had a show last night in Tucson, I believe, in Hotel Congress. But yeah, definitely something that I recommend. I've been including some of their songs in our playlist. So definitely, if you're looking for something a little bit more upbeat, darkwave, Corbo Hangs is something that I recommend.
Well, I'm going to look that up for sure. I'm going to go make it song of the day. I can't wait. I'm going to go listen to that. And I think that's another thing too that I want to give you guys a shout out for, is that you have always been so good as you've started to make your own fortune, your own good fortune in playing music like this, through your hard work, like I said, of doing something that's uncomfortable for you, as people who are not easily sociable people, to force yourself to go out and engage with fans. The other part of that is you have always been somebody who lifts other bands up with you. And, like you said, shares them on playlists, just talks about them, things like that. And I think a lot of times people really underestimate how far that goes towards also lifting yourself up, because that's what I think fans want to see nowadays, is people who have some humility and care about wanting to lift the entire scene up, not just themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And aside from being musicians, we both love music. We're both music lovers, and it's great. It's great when we were coming out at first, when people would take the time to share a link on YouTube of us playing live, or it just goes a long way. It goes a long way, and that's kind of how it started snowballing for us. So it's cool to just stop and just set your ego to the side, or just listen, and just it's cool to just to praise your friend's success. I love my friends do good, and these are just some bands that we look up to, and it's awesome that the people like them too.
I love it. I love it. All right. So this has been wonderful talking with you guys again. I'm so excited to see you in Ann Arbor here coming up. Who knows? I might even see you in Chicago too. So I'm just really geeked for that. I'm so impressed with, just like I said, what you guys have done with this well-deserved success and the hard work you've been putting in. And I know this album is going to hit in the same way. So for our listeners out here, because by the time this interview releases, the album will be out, what is a song that you would like us to spin out to you that you really feel encapsulates you know, if people are going to hear one Twin Tribe song from this new album and have that be the one that brings them into the fold, what's the song that you would want them to hear?
I'll go ahead and say track number 5, Temperance, is my favorite track of the album, and it has everything that I love that we do. Lyrics, the you know, the melodies, the choruses. That's just my overall favorite song from that album. So just throwing it out there.
I was checking. I just went to look so I could go through it to see which one mine was too. So I'm going to see how my answer stacks up. Joelle, do you have the same answer, or do you have a different one that's your favorite?
I do have a different one. For me, it's while I don't think it'll be released just yet, it should be out by December. A Cauldron of Thorns is just one of my favorite tracks on the album, just because while it's very like what we do, it's also very different.
Yeah.
And you'll see when you hear it, right? And so yeah, that's one of my favorite tracks. Very romantic, very, yeah, the lyrics hit like just amazingly, and just the vibe of it. I can't wait to play it live.
I love that one too, and it's because I think that romantic goth is something that needs to come back. Like I always talk about, there's a few bands out there like A Covenant of Thorns, a few others that I really like that are still doing that, you know, pure pornography, like tragic romantic goth, you know. And every time a band leans into it, that's one of the most liked songs on the album, and I just don't understand why we don't see more of it. So I think that's a great pick too. Although, Joelle, I'm going to have to disappoint you on this one, that when I was listening through and firing it through, Temperance was actually the track that hit me the most. But I think everything on this album, you're right, it does have, for me, a different feel in the sense of how much more you've leaned into the electronic. Like going from, say, especially, you know, not in between, you know, but Shadows to this was much more, it was a lot just guitar and bass based with, you know, you could have recorded on a 4-track and it still would have had the same impact and power because it wasn't the bells and whistles that made it sing, it was the heart. This album has that same kind of drive and heart, but the technology game, the production game is so much higher for this. And I think that's really going to sync well for letting someone play it in a club. Like this album is for the club, whereas that was for hanging out on a Friday night with your friends and a bottle of wine on a record player. You know, I think to me, that's the biggest change. And that I'm excited for how that heart translates into slamming club beats that go with it, you know. And I'm really excited for people to get to absorb that. So I think I'm going to be the deciding vote here, and we are going to spin out to Temperance off the new album here. But I can't wait for everything coming up in the future. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And everybody, please enjoy new Twin Tribes, Temperance. From all of us here at Sounds and Shadows, keep it dark, y'all.